Good morning, students. In our last class, we have completed some part of the lesson Democratic and Nationalistic Revolution 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. So, I hope you are listening the classes and following the lesson. So, today moving to the another part of the lesson, a growing middle class and end to privileges. So, a new social group called the middle class came up in the 18th century, earned wealth through overseas trade and manufacturing of goods such as woolen and silk textiles. In addition to merchants and manufacturers, the third estate also included well educated professionals such as lawyers and administrative officials. They were inspired by the words of the philosophers like John Locke and Jacques. Jean Jacques Rousseau, who wanted to create a society based on freedom and equal laws and opportunities for all. In his book Two Treasuries of Government, Locke wrote against the belief that the monarch had absolute rights. Rousseau carried the same idea forward. He proposed that government should be based on a social contract between the people and their representatives. In the book The Spirit of the Laws, Montesquieu, a philosopher, proposed that power should be divided between the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. This model of government was followed in the USA after the 13 colonies declared their independence from Britain. The American Constitution and its guarantee of individual rights was an important example for third estate in France. In our last class, we have seen that there are three estate people were there. One is clergy, one is the nobility, and the third is peasants and different types of people, lawyers are under the third estate. So, here what they are telling is a new social group called the middle class came up in the 18th century. So, they earned wealth through overseas trade. I told you, trade means import and export process through trade means import and export. So, overseas trade means with the help of ships using the source as sea or oceans, they were trading and manufacturing of goods. So, what did they manufacture? They manufactured woolen and silk textiles. So, in addition to merchants and manufacturers, the third estate also included well educated professionals such as lawyers and administrative officials. So, not in addition to this, merchants and manufacturers, also third estate people who were well educated, they were also educated professionals like whom? Lawyers and administrative officials. So, they were included in the middle class, means a social group was created. So, in that, these third estate people were also added. So, they were inspired by the words, whose words philosophers like John Locke and Jean Jacques Rousseau, who wanted to create a society, means they were inspired by the words of the philosophers who were uh, who gave the inspiration to them, means their words of they created a society based on freedom and equal laws and opportunities for all. So, in his book Two Treasures of Government, means Locke wrote a book name is Two Treasures of Government. So, in that, against the belief of that monarch had absolute rights. So, a monarch means king. So, everyone used to say that king has the whole powers, yes. So he is telling that against the power of monarch he had written a book, Two Treasures of Government, and Rouses carried the same idea forward. So what he has written, Rouses has carried the same, and he proposed that government should be based on a social contract between the people and their representatives. So, in the book, The Spirit of the Laws, Montesquieu, a philosopher, he proposed, what did he propose? That power should be divided between the legislature and the executive and the judiciary. So Montesquieu in his book Spirit of Laws, he what did he proposed is power should be divided between three persons, means who are they? One is legislature and the other is executive and the last one is judiciary. He say that in these three the power should be divided. So this model of government was followed in the USA. Which model? Where the judiciary is divided into three. So after the 13 colonies declared their independence from Britain, I told you there were 13 colonies who were migrated to America from Britain. I told you that. So these people, they were, it means they declared their independence from Britain, and the American constitution and its guarantee of individual rights, we all have rights, yes or no? So even they were having. So the American constitution and its guarantee of individual rights was an important example for third estate in France. So the outbreak of the revolution on 5th May 1789 CE, Louis XVI called a meeting of the Estates General to pass a proposal for new taxes. The first and second estate, 300 representatives each, who were seated in rows facing each other on two sides, but the 600 members of the third estate had to stand at the back. The third estate was represented by its more prosperous and educated members only. Peasants, artisans, and women were not allowed to enter the assembly. However, their problems and demands were written down in some 40,000 letters which the representatives had brought with them. So, what happened here? On 5th May of 1789 CE, who is the king at that time? Yes, he is Louis XVI. So what did he do? He called a meeting for the Estates General to pass proposals for new taxes. So he conducted a meeting for Estates General how to collect a new tax. For that purpose, he has conducted the meeting. So, the first and second estates sent 300 representatives each. So, what did this first and second estate people do? They have sent 300 representatives each, and how they were seated in rows facing each other on two sides. But whereas the 600 members of the third estate had to stand at the back. Even you can see that in this image. They were sitting in the big hall. This first and second estate people were sitting facing each other, whereas the people, remaining people, we can see in that image standing behind them. Yes or no? So that is how they were seated. So in the third estate, mostly who were there? More prosperous and educated members only were allowed. Means not all the members of the third estate were not allowed. They only the prosperous and educated person was allowed from the third estate. So the remaining peasants, artisans and women, they were not allowed to enter the assembly. So however, their problems and demands were, so though they are not allowed, what did they do? They have written their problems and demands in some 40,000 letters, and which the representatives were having them. So earlier each estate had one vote in the voting. Louis XVI also wanted to continue the same practice, but the members of the third estate demanded that voting be done by the assembly as a whole, where each member would have one vote. This was one of the democratic principles suggested by the philosophers like Rawls in his book The Social Contract. When the king rejected this proposal, members of the third estate left the assembly in the protest. So what happened here? So earlier, how the voting system was? Earlier, each estate had only one vote. We have three estates. So in that, each estate has one vote in the voting. So Louis XVI also wanted to continue the same practice. But what happened? But the members of the third estate demanded the voting means be done by the assembly as a whole, where each member would have one vote. So this was one of the democratic principles suggested by philosophers like Rawls in his book The Social Contrast. So when the king rejected this proposal, so what happened? Members of third estate left the assembly in protest. Means as the king is not accepting their proposal, so as they want to protest the king, means against the king, they went, means they left the assembly without discussing their, means without allowing them to continue their meeting. These people have left the assembly. Even we can see in our own means we will be having assembly meetings, parliamentary meetings, and you have observed it in news and TV, I think so. So even the people there in our in the real life, what we see today also, our leaders, ministers, what they do when they are against to the government, any, or if they want to get any benefit, if the government doesn't agree, what they will do? Even they also will protest the assembly, and they may leave the assembly, or the different types of practices were followed. So in the same way here also, they were demanding for everyone to get vote right. Instead of having a vote from each estate, they want every person of the estate to get chance to vote. So when this king opposed that, so these people, they when the king rejected this proposal, these members of the third estate, what did they do? They left the assembly in protest. The tennis court oath. The representatives of the third estate felt that they were representing the whole French nation on, on 20 June 1789 CE. They assembled in the hall of an indoor tennis court in the grounds of Versailles under the leadership of Mirabeau, Abbé Sieyès and Bailey. They declared themselves as a national assembly. They swore not to go back till they had drafted a constitution for France that would limit the powers of the monarch. While the National Assembly was busy drafting a constitution at Versailles, there were rising chaos and disturbance in the rest of France. The crops had ruined because of extreme winter. The price of bread went up because of this. Bakers misused this situation and accumulated supplies of bread. People waited for hours in long queues at the bakery. After waiting for long, crowds of angry women forcefully entered into the shops. At the same time, the king had ordered troops to move into Paris. On 14th July, the angry crowd forcefully entered and destroyed the Bastille, a hated prison that represents the complete monarchy. That day is being celebrated as the National Day of France. After seeing the power of the revolting people, Louis XVI finally gave recognition to the National Assembly. He accepted the principle that his powers would be limited by a constitution from now on. On 4th of August 1789 CE, the Assembly passed a law to ban the feudal system of taxes and other obligations. Members of the clergy were also forced to give up their privileges. Thieves were banned and lands owned by the church were taken back from them. So, what happened? You can see here the tennis court oath. So, what happened? The representatives of the third estate, they felt that they were representing the whole French nation. And what did they do? On 20th June 1789 CE, they all assembled in the hall of an indoor tennis court in the grounds of Versailles under the leadership of Mirabeau, Abbé Sieyès and Bailey. So these people all, they were assembled in the hall of an indoor tennis court in the grounds of Versailles. So you can see that in the image here, everyone was standing and they are taking an oath. So that's why, as they are standing in the tennis court, so they have got the name the tennis court oath. So here what happened? So they declared themselves as a national assembly, who the third estate people, and they swore not to go back till they had drafted a constitution for France. So they have promised themselves that they will not go back until they draft a constitution of for France, and that would limit the powers of the monarch. So monarch means, I told you, king. So the powers of the king will be limited when they create this constitution. So while the National Assembly was busy drafting a constitution at Versailles, so there was rising chaos and disturbances in the rest of France. So when these people were busy in drafting a constitution, so what happened? there was rising chaos and disturbances in the rest of France. So what happened? The crops had ruined because of extreme winters. And what is the situation? The price of bread went up because of this. Even we also sometimes there will be a huge rise means increase in rates of vegetables or any products. So why? Because of the shortage. Even the same here, as the crops were ruined because of the extreme winters, the price of bread went up. So because of this, what even the bakers also will misuse that chance. And what they will do? So they have accumulated supplies of bread. So without selling, they have what did they do? They have stored. So people waited for hours in long queues at the bakery, and after waiting for long, crowds of angry women, what did they do? They have forcefully entered the shops. So at the same time, what happened? The king had ordered troops to move into Paris. On 14th July, the angry crowd forcefully entered and destroyed the Bastille. So a hated prison means these angry people, they have destroyed the prison. It is a very hated prison that represented the complete monarchy. So that day is celebrated as the National Day of France, when these angry people destroyed the hated prison. And that day these people will celebrate as the National Day of France. So after seeing the power of the revolting people, what did the king do? Louis XVI, he finally gave recognition to the National Assembly, and he accepted the principle that his power would be limited by a constitution from now on. So by seeing all these, the king Louis XVI, he accepted that his powers would be limited by the constitution from now on. And on 4th of August 1789, what happened? The assembly passed a law to ban the feudal system of taxes and other obligations. So, members of the clergy were also forced to give up their privileges. So, and thieves were banned, and lands owned by the church were taken back from them. So, here, what happened on 4th of August 1789? The Assembly passed a law to ban the feudal system of taxes and other obligations, and also they have forced to give up their who the clergy people were also forced to give up their privileges, and thieves were banned, and land owned by the churches also they have taken. And I think you have understood till here. We'll be completing the remaining part of the lesson in the next session. If you have any doubts, you can message me. uh, Thank you. Have a good day.